All right, well, joining me now is Michael Long. He has journeyed from Melbourne to Canberra. He's, of course, a former AFL star and he's a supporter of the Voice referendum, an Indigenous star, in case you didn't know. Michael, thanks for your time. So I know you walked a long part of the way, but you got some pretty creaky knees. It's been a long journey, however much you did walk anyway. I'm sure you had a lot of time to think. What was going through your mind about the referendum and about Australian people's views on it as well as you were coming up to Canberra from Melbourne?
Yeah, well, it's sort of a bit of reflection from, nearly 20 years ago we walked and why we walked. It was obviously, it was at a time 90 years ago, we were walking to put back Indigenous issues back on the national agenda. It was a time when Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island Commission was being abolished. We were asking people where was the voice, where was the vision for Indigenous Australia, but more importantly, where was the love? And this year it echoed in the referendum, yes, 23 campaign, and it echoed what we were talking about 20 years ago. So with the short pre-season, as you said, with the body, but we were walking for change and the referendum and a voice to Parliament and acknowledgement of Indigenous people. And we felt that love in our big communities, our bigger towns and smaller communities were just as loud and obviously just as proactive in wanting to see this happen. So it was different, but more importantly, people could join us at different legs of the walk and be actively involved. That was great to see, and it gave us more energy and obviously wanting to to achieve this and the referendum and the work and that had been done through communities was amazing. It was great to see.
So when you talk about that positive side of it, obviously the overall polling suggests it's in trouble. But let's start on the positive reception. As you said, you were wondering on this walk and the past walk, where is the love? How did you feel that love from some everyday Australians? How did that sort of manifest when they came and spoke to you about not just what you're doing, but the Voice in general?
Well, we ran into Pat Farmer, who met us. I think, and he's still got another 4,000, I think, miles to go. And just hearing his story and why he's doing. But there were people from both sides of Parliament who joined us as well, and that's the great thing about this referendum. We keep reminding people this is not an election; it's a referendum. It's about people coming together, and that still echoes with with the Uluru Statement. It's about love, embracing people, and moving forward. But yeah, we obviously are not blinded by the noises out there, but I think it's time as a nation and to have a respectful conversation. And we did that with people along the way who some of our walkers convinced other people that, why? Why is the reason you're actually voting?
So those people, because you said it's not a usual election, but it's mostly divided along those usual political lines, which maybe has tended it towards a usual election. The people who were unconvinced, or maybe you were just flat out no's, what are they saying to you or people you're with? What do they start the conversation with? Here's why I'm reluctant, or here's why I'm voting no. What are you hearing that they have that reasoning for?
Well, I was talking to Dean Parkin only yesterday, and it was probably 95% of people were actually welcoming and obviously advocating for the Voice. So it was whether it's different to what the polls are showing us. And he said the same thing, that people are door knocking and the amount of support there is for the Yes campaign. But I suppose it is a democracy we live in, but our strong focus is around change, is around life expectancy, is around education, is around the infectious diseases, around housing. That's the big important part of me. We need to close the gap, and I think it's a time as Australian that we can have a mature conversation. We can have and a respectful one.
The markers you talk about, I mean, when you did this walk 20 years ago, some of these measures have barely improved. A lot more focus is on them, a lot more money spent. Everyone sort of agrees they haven't improved, it's not going well, and yet the graph we just had up before had this dwindling support for yes. Why do you think, at least the opinion polls suggest it's not getting majority support, at least at the moment, 4 weeks out?
Well, we're only going to hope for change, and I suppose doing the walk, and we've got to believe that things are going to get better, Tom. We've got to believe things are going to get better. And I believe in Pat Dodson. I believe in Linda. They want change for everyone. And deep down in my heart, we spoke about those things 20 years ago, and it has widened. and it hasn't got better. And as we've always advocated, now is a time. How do we move forward, or when do we move forward? I mean, obviously the other ministers call for a constitution, Aboriginal people having another referendum, but you got to have a voice with that. You got to have a.
So if there's another referendum just on constitutional recognition,
I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough.
Would you be in a difficult position because you'd sort of like it to happen, but
our focus is winning this one.
Okay.
And I think, like with any footballer, we're in the last quarter of this, and we've always had a vision and belief that we've got to move forward and win this. And as a team, you got to have that belief in Australians, and that's what I believe. And I've seen that goodwill, but we've got to turn that into action now.
I guess but if you want to go the analogy, it's probably in the third quarter, a few goals down. So momentum is there. There is still 4 weeks to go in the campaign. There's a lot of talk this week in Canberra about the no side and whether there's a racism aspect to it. I want to go back even further because if you go back to Australia in the mid-90s, you really publicly confronted what was then overt and public racism. That I think if young Australians experienced that now, they'd be pretty shocked at what was happening. Not just the comments from Damien Moncourse, and I know you've reconciled with him and he was sorry for it, but think of some of the comments from Alan McAllister. Do you feel as though the country's changed for the better since then? How do you reflect on how Australia feels towards Indigenous Australians in that time compared to now?
Well, it's not perfect. The world's not perfect. And it comes back to education. And it still remains today. But I think the game's grown with that. Clubs, our supporters have changed that. It's no longer acceptable. And it's not everyone. And that's why I say it's not perfect. But sports played its role in changing people's attitudes. It's brought in the racial vilification code.
Probably ahead of parts of society, and I guess Australian rules football always had more Indigenous players, or not always, but for decades compared to the rest of society, and maybe got their head around the issue.
And it's
earlier.
got a lot of multicultural players, and this rules for everyone, and we cannot be ignorance play a part of that. And I think in a lot of ways we had some of the football clubs here today. We had the Essendon Football Club, we had the Richmond Football Club, we had Sam Mossman, part of the AFL Commission as well. Football's played an enormous part, and I've seen that, and I've been touched by it. But also, Indigenous round plays an enormous part for reconciliation, and it's hard to measure that sometimes what it does in our community. And we've believed in reconciliation. I believe in what the game can do in bridging the gap, and I think our football teams are the same. I remember we had a handful of Indigenous players back in the earlier days, but that's changed, and I think clubs have changed, and they're just as proactive, just like any organisation. But sport plays an important part to Australian society.
Because you mentioned understanding, and I suppose that's the biggest way to bridge racism and racist attitudes. We're not perfect. I guess there'll always be an element of racism, but it even makes me think of Greek Australians arriving to Australia and initially outcast, and then they're sort of seen as multicultural Australia as people began to understand them better and realise it was just different culture. And that's it's almost been a path for Australians, even though you're the First Nations people, that the rest of the country, understanding is the key there, you think? Whether it's the voice or whatever else is down the track?
Well, it's about education, and we're probably 100,000 kids. Probably next month we've reached over this journey with the long walk, and it's about talking about history. It's about talking about culture, understanding and respect. And we've done that. We've tried to do that. And when we got back from the walk, how do we help change society and understanding? And it was our kids. We said, let's focus on our kids. Let's focus on education, because they'll shape this country in the end, what it looks like. And hopefully there's a bit of empathy for not just Indigenous people, but all cultures.
Michael Long, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Tom.